your brother kill your mother and father?
Were you being sexually molested by your father?
He would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him.
I thought he was going to kill me that night.
August 20th, 1989 at 11:47 p.m., Lyle, the eldest son of the Menendez family, calls 911 and reports the murder of his parents, Jose Menendez and Mary Louise Anderson.
Beverly Hills emergency?
Yes, police.
What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem?
Someone killed my parents.
Pardon me?
Someone killed my parents.
What? Who? Are they still there?
Yes.
The people... What?
No.
Were they shot?
Hey, man, dude.
Were they shot?
Yes.
They were shot?
Yes.
What happened?
I don't know.
Who shot who?
I don't hear anything. I just came home.
You came home and found who shot?
Mom and Dad.
Jose Menendez was an incredibly successful and wealthy businessman. He graduated in 1967 with a degree in accounting, and because he had earned a reputation for being professional, he was hired by RCA Records. One of the people who worked with Jose at this company says,
"If you took a poll, a lot of people whose oxes were gored by Jose would have to tell you they didn't like him."
After RCA Records, in 1986, the Menendez family moved to Beverly Hills, and Jose started working at Video Entertainment and saved the company from bankruptcy. On January 10, 1968, the first son, Joseph Lyle, and on November 27, 1970, Erik Galen were born. Jose, who was a very successful and wealthy man at the time, provided the best facilities for his children, but in return, he had high expectations of them. Jose wanted his sons to be the best in everything, to perform every task in the most correct way possible, so he put them under a lot of pressure.
And sometimes he was rough with the swimming.
What do you mean he was rough with the swimming?
Sexually irrelevant.
I'm sorry?
Sexually irrelevant.
Overruled. You may ask your question.
It was like they were just drills, and I would swim laps, and sometimes he would just yank me out of the water by my hair, and he would shake you, and he took it very, very seriously. He was training to be an Olympic swimmer at one point, and so he had all kinds of different methods and how to expand your lungs and how long I should be able to hold my breath.
Lyle and Erik did not perform very well in school and were not outstanding students, but both of them very interested in playing tennis. So, Jose provided the best facilities for his sons to turn them into tennis champions.
Getting back to your tennis. When you would be playing, when you would be practicing, would your father be there participating in your practices?
In tennis?
Yes.
Not every time, but most of the time my dad was there. Anytime he could be there, he would be there.
And when you were playing in tournaments, was your father there?
Yes, or he would fly in, and a lot of times I remember I would start the first couple points, and then I'd see my dad show up in a business suit, having just arrived.
Would you be glad to see him?
Yes.
As the boys grew up, their father's interference in their lives increased more and more. Jose even controlled the friendships and relationships of the boys. He didn't want Lyle and Erik to make any choices that would tarnish the Menendez family name. Jose was very harsh at work, so his employees were extremely afraid of him. He also continually cheated on Kitty, and everyone was aware of this, even Kitty herself. It is said that Kitty was severely depressed and had even attempted suicide, but at the same time, she had no intention of separating from Jose and tried to maintain her life.
My mother was a person in a lot of pain, and she was alcoholic, and she was suicidal.
I saw her as, heard and saw her get beaten by my dad.
Now, let's go back to the night of the incident, August 20th, 1989.
We're at 722 North Elm Drive. Reported double homicide. Present at the scene are Detectives Zoller, myself, and Lenahan.
After the police arrived at the crime scene, they found Jose and Kitty covered in blood. Lyle and Erik were crying incessantly, and their condition was so bad that the police did not even suspect for a moment that the boys could be the killers of Jose and Kitty.
I've not been told any statements that said that it was or was not a hit, or it was a robbery, or it was something else. We're not sure, and we're not speculating at this time what it may have been.
But after the murder of their parents, the behavior of the sons soon changed. They began to spend the inheritance that they had not even fully accessed yet. Their extravagant spending was so significant that it eventually led the police to become suspicious of them. Also, Lyle and Erik showed no interest in following up on their parents' case.
Investigators say one reason they began to zero in on the Menendez boys is that they didn't do a very good job of acting the roles of grieving sons. Police say the boys went on a wild spending spree, and unlike the relatives of most murder victims, the Menendez boys did not seem to take much interest in the police search for their parents' murderers.
A while before Jose and Kitty were murdered, Erik and his friend Craig Signorelli wrote a screenplay called Friends about a boy who murders his parents for their inheritance. After realizing what had happened, Craig went to the police and told them everything he knew about Erik. He even told police that Erik had confessed to him about killing his parents, so the police gave him a body wire and asked him to get another confession from Erik, but this time, he wasn't successful.
It was shown to you on a diagram. Just tell us what was said, okay?
All right. He said that he went back outside and his brother was standing there with two and said, "Let's do it." And they walked inside and Lyle was standing, or Erik went up to the door on the left, which was slightly open, and the door on the right, Lyle went up and put his shoulder against the door on the right, and Erik said he looked in and saw his parents sitting on the couch, and Lyle swung the door open and his father, and looked at Erik and said, "Mom," and Erik said he his mom, and she was standing up and yelling.
What was he doing at this point? Was he emotional at this point, or was it matter of fact? Could you describe for the jurors how he related this story?
Just probably a little less nervous than I just did. Just, casual and kind of a low tone of voice. Just in, conversation tone.
During this period, Erik was in contact with his therapist, Dr. Jerome Oziel, who had been chosen by his father sometime before he was murdered. Dr. Oziel noticed a change in Erik's behavior and ultimately managed to obtain a confession from him and recorded it. However, Oziel did not hand over the tapes to the police, but ultimately, Dr. Oziel's girlfriend, Judilon Rose Smythe, did it. She informed the police about the existence of these tapes, and eventually, they obtained the tapes from Dr. Oziel.
I am very upset that the law seems to decide who they will prosecute and who they won't prosecute. I thought that the law was supposed to protect all innocent people.
On July 20th, 1993, the first trial of the Menendez brothers was held. This trial received extensive media coverage and was broadcast live on television. During this trial, Lyle and Erik unveiled secrets that Jose Menendez had made great efforts to keep hidden. The Menendez brothers claimed that their father had sexually abused them, Lyle from the age of 6 to 8 and Erik from the age of 6 to 18.
Did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
And how did it start?
It just started with, after sports practices, he would massage me, and we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress.
Where would this take place?
In my bedroom.
And how often would this happen?
Like 2 or 3 times a week.
Did you want to do this?
he raped me.
Did you cry?
Yes.
Did you bleed?
Yes.
Were you scared?
Very.
Did you ask him not to?
Yes.
How did you ask him not to?
I just told him, I don't.
Did you think that it might be happening to someone else?
Yes.
And who did you think it was happening to?
Erik.
And did you do something about it?
Yes.
What did you do?
I talked to my dad.
What did you say to your dad?
I told him that I knew what was going on with him and Erik, and I heard the noises, and that I wanted him to leave Erik alone.
And what did he say to you?
He told me that Erik was that Erik made things up sometimes, but that it would stop, and we should keep it just between us, or he'd kill me.
Mr. Menendez, during the summer of 1989, were you being sexually molested by your father?
Yes.
And when did that begin? How old were you?
I was 6 years old.
Now, you have seen, how long, from the time you were 6 when you say your father started to molest you, how long did that go on?
12 years.
And were there episodes of sexual activity with your father over that last summer?
Yes.
Lyle Menendez mentioned that he had told his mother about the abuse, but she didn't do anything about it.
What did your mom say?
She told me to stop it, and that I was exaggerating, and that my dad has to punish me when I do things wrong. And she told me that he loved me.
Did your mother ever come upon you when you were crying?
Sometimes after these, I'd have to go downstairs to dinner, or afterwards, and she would come when she'd see me crying, and,
Did she ever ask you, Erik, what are you crying about?
No.
Would she ask you that sometimes if you were crying and it had nothing to do with sex with your father?
Yes.
And what would she say, if anything, to you when you were crying following these episodes with your father?
She would say, do what I told you to do.
What had she told you to do?
She taught me how to hide my tears and to not cry. And if I was crying, she taught me how to get rid of the tears.
Lyle and Erik were not aware of what had happened to the other one, and they only realized a few days before they murdered their parents that Jose had sexually abused both of them. Although the two brothers were very close, they did not talk about the issue because Jose threatened both of them to remain silent.
I didn't know what to do at the time, so I figured I'd tell Lyle and maybe he could help me.
He started telling me that one of the reasons he had never told me before was because my dad had always threatened his life.
Menendez brothers stated that they felt if they didn't act sooner, Jose would kill both of them.
I thought he was going to kill me that night.
They carried out their decision with the guns they had purchased a few days earlier. There was not much evidence to verify the truthfulness of Lyle and Erik's statements, but some of their relatives testified in favor of the boys in the court.
He proceeded to indicate to me by touching himself down and saying that his dad and him had been touching each other down there.
And what did he ask you to do?
He wanted to sleep down there.
And what did you do?
I went and got Kitty and brought her downstairs and told her what was going on.
How did Lyle seem at this time? Was this a joke? Or did he...
No, he was serious.
And what happened when Kitty came down?
She didn't believe me.
Did you tell her?
Yes, I told her what I believed to be going on, what Lyle was indicating to me. And she immediately, I don't remember that she said anything to me, just that I knew that she did not believe me. And she took Lyle and brought him back upstairs.
When you say she took him, did she physically grab him?
She took him by the arm.
He asked me if my dad ever gave me massages.
And did you understand at that point what he meant?
No, I didn't. Well, he told me his father was massaging his.
He used that word?
Yes, he did.
I believed him. Straightforward. I believed him. Because of the noises I heard coming out of the room, the fact that Kitty would not allow me to go down the hallway to find out what was going on, how I wasn't allowed to see the boys right after they came out of the bedroom, all these different things just clicked. And that's when I really said to myself, you know what? That son of a bitch was actually doing what they say he was doing back in that bedroom.
First trial could not reach a verdict, so a second trial was held in October 1995, which received less media coverage, and it was announced that Lyle and Erik were not allowed to speak about the abuse they had suffered from their father. Dr. Oziel also spoke at this trial and stated that Lyle and Erik had threatened him that if he spoke about their confessions, they would kill him. Ultimately, Lyle and Erik were found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Their final sentence was life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The judge announced that in the given verdict, the claims made by Lyle and Erik about the abuses they had endured were not considered, and the motive for the murder, according to the court, was financial. Now that many years have passed since the trial of Lyle and Erik Menendez, there is new evidence that, if presented in a new trial, could potentially lead to a reconsideration of the final verdict. The first piece of evidence were revealed in 2018. At the time, the boy's aunt found a letter that Erik had written to his cousin Andy in December 1988, about 8 months before the crime occurred. In this letter, Erik wrote,
"I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy. But it's worse for me now. Every night I stay up thinking he might come in. He's crazy. He's warned me 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle."
His second piece of evidence was revealed in 2023 when Roy Rosello states that he was sexually abused by Jose Menendez when he was a teenager. Roy is a Puerto Rican pop and gospel singer, and at the time he was a member of the Menundo music group, and Jose was involved with RCA Records. So he had interactions with the group. Roy explains that when he was 15 years old, he went to Jose's house, drank a glass of wine, and then felt like he did not have any control on his body.
Jose Menéndez me dijo, toma este vino, es un vino carísimo, y tómate toda la taza. Después que yo me la tomé, yo me comencé a sentir un cansancio, un peso. Yo no podía más moverme. A partir de ese momento, yo solamente veía cosas como que desenfocadas. Alguien me empujó, alguien me cargó, alguien trying to push me. Y yo caminé un pasillo bien largo. Y había un cuarto. Yo no podía reaccionar porque eso me estaba tomando cuenta de mi cuerpo. Me drogaron. Y después de eso, yo amanecí en el hotel. ¿Cómo yo llegué al hotel? Yo no sé. Pero cuando yo fui al baño, I was bleeding.
The day after this documentary was broadcast on May 3rd, 2023, Lyle and Erik requested that their sentences be overturned, but their request had no effect. The lawyers for Lyle and Erik argue that based on this new evidence, it can be stated that Lyle and Erik, because of their father's abuse, had PTSD, which led them to decide to commit the murder. PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, occurs in individuals who have experienced a traumatic event. According to the court, this disorder can lead to insanity and justify self-defense. What do you think? Do you believe these two brothers deserved the sentence they received?